Hey, Shalom, Shalom, Shalom. Call hello, Yahweh, Shem Yahushua, Shem Kodash. Once again, double honors go out to the apostles, bishops, and elders of Great Millstone. We reserve double honors. Salutations also go out to the fellow Akim out there on the highways and byways, pushing the truth across the four corners of the earth, trying to wake up the remaining hopeful elect, because time is indeed very short. This is Nama with the DC camp. And as you see here, this is from the Griot, alright, daily with Michael Harriot, alright. It's titled, What So-Called White People, They Are the Nation of Edom, that's their biblical nationality, said what they're really afraid of. And I, for one, before we get started, myself and others, of course, had always tried to tell people there was more to this going on when several years ago they were taking away, or taking down rather, the statues of Confederate soldiers and other officials. There was more to it. So why would he so easily, just give in to something like this? They're heroes after all, you know. But you have to consider that all that's been done, alright, it's a shame unto them now. But there's something more to it. Yes, it's big now. Alright, it's out there. Alright, everybody's talking about it. Alright, it's coming up. You've got this new movie, The Life of Clarence. Something to that effect. But anyway, and it's depicting the Israelites that lived in that period in Jerusalem and thereabouts, rightfully so. And you have to understand, it's not so much the doctrine as much it is, well, you've got so-called black people. Alright, that's another thing they fear, but it's the truth. This is what, hey, and they're calling it terrorists and everything else, but that's what the truth is to a lie. Alright, but anyway, let's just go ahead with this, and here we go. I'm just going to read. I'm not going to jump ahead or anything, but you have to remember. Let's start off with a scripture here. And as I'm reading this, bear this scripture in mind. Alright. Keep it in your brain housing group, as we used to say. This is Psalms 43 and 1. Alright. It says, send out your light and your truth. Judge me, O Most High Yahweh, and plead my cause against an ungodly nation. That's who we're dealing with. The nation of Edom, they are the wicked. It tells you that in Malachi, the first chapter. Read verses 1 through 4. The point is in 4. They're also called the, border of wickedness. Oh, deliver me from the deceitful and unjust man. Alright, keep that in mind. Alright. So remember, this is a script for this podcast. Alright. So it says, what they're worrying about is your kids learning about what so-called white people did. Michael Harriot looks at the changes to school curriculums in places like Florida and Tennessee and finds that states aren't erasing so-called black history. Instead, schools are leaving out white people's role in black history. Get a load of that. So let's go into it. Remember that scripture I read? Alright, he's going to find some way to dip and dodge. Alright, full transcript. It says, guys, I know you're worried. I know you're worried that your children in Florida are going to learn that slavery was like a worker program, or that Jim Crow was just a little phase America was going through. But that's why I want to welcome you to the Griot Daily, the only podcast that will tell you that there is actually no movement to erase black history. Yeah, I know. You've heard that all that stuff about the Florida curriculum, about how I call him moron, DeSantis, is erasing black history, how states across the country are doing it, passing these anti-woke laws, because that's code now for, anything pertaining to us. But see, they're trying to meld us with the LGBTQ. And see, this is what you people that march with those things, all right, this is what you've done. All right, anyway, it says how states across the country are doing it, passing these anti-woke laws, these laws to fight CRT, as a so-called critical race theory. Well, my proposal is anytime you hear anything about the Holocaust, you call that a theory. All right, it's far more truth than that. All right, it says, but I was thinking about it, and if you look at the actual curriculum, that's not what they're doing. They're not erasing black history. Black history ain't never got to go nowhere because they're not even afraid of black history. What they're doing is erasing so-called white history. So, what do I mean by that? Well, if you look at the curriculums and the laws that they're passing to make so-called white children feel comfortable, something else that this is all about, and it came out of Condoleezza Rice's mouth, why you want to make, little Tommy feel so, you forgot what they did to you and still doing to your people. See, that's these sellouts. It says, first of all, they're not opposed to, what show was he on? Salaki, what show was she on? Was it The View? She said that crazy ass shit. I'm talking about Condoleezza Rice. I think it was The View. Anyway, so let's see. First of all, they're not opposed to children learning stuff like the Civil Rights Movement was an effort to gain equal rights. They're not even worried about your kids learning about slavery. What they're worrying about is your kids learning about what white people did. And we've always said that. They don't want to see granddaddy, whoever that motherfucker is, or grandma, yelling and spitting at a little 9-year-old girl because she's trying to go to school. Which is something I too, even though that has nothing to do with this video, I've always argued against that. It's something we should have never tried to integrate. And I think a huge portion of our people realize that now. This shit was all, again, that's another video. Let's continue with this, all right? It says, for instance, the Tampa Bay Times recently submitted a FOIA, that's Freedom of Information Act, request for basically the notes from those meetings that determined the Florida curriculum. And what they found was that they really weren't objecting to the black parts of black history. They were scared of the white parts. Here's a quote. For example, a lesson in the advanced placement course focused on how Europeans benefited from trading enslaved people and the materials enslaved laborers produced. All right. The state objected to the content, saying the instructional approach, quote, may lead to a viewpoint of an oppressor versus oppressed based solely on race or ethnicity. But that's the truth. Again, what they're afraid of, the truth. It indeed was an oppressor versus oppress. You can't have a victim without a victimizer. You see how they like to control the narrative? Goodness. Anyway, let's see. End quote. Well, as you can see, they actually addressed European slavery, right? But they just didn't want you to know about the oppression part. And the oppression part is what white people did, all right? According to the articles, the specific complaint was that the unit may not address the internal slave system trade within Africa, and that, quote, it may only present one side of the issue. It may not offer any opposing viewpoints or other perspectives on this subject. Oh, a devil is a devil is a devil is a devil. A liar and deceiver. He goes on and says, all right, I didn't know that it was two sides of slavery. I mean, I guess technically there are two sides of slavery. There's the side that says slavery was a brutal, intergenerational, constitutionally, Salakia, constitutionally enforced, which it was, legal form of human subjugation that reduced human beings to chattel property based solely on race. And the other viewpoint is, I mean, yeah, but we really needed some slaves, though. Oh, boy. And here again we have the host. She says, so what they think will make children feel uncomfortable is the racism part. Like, there was another story that Tennessee objected to lessons on Ruby Bridges because, you know, Ruby Bridges actually integrated schools, but they didn't want to know about the parents who lined up outside. See what I was just, see? All right. But they didn't want to know about the parents who lined up outside of the schoolhouse when Ruby Bridges was entering school and yelled at her and spat on her. So they're cool with the Ruby Bridges part, right? Ruby Bridges is an uplifting story about how one brave little girl triumphed and gave freedom for her people, but they don't want you to understand what she triumphed over. They are cool with you learning about the civil rights movement, as long as you don't know what Martin Luther King and those civil rights protesters were fighting against. They are cool with you learning about, for instance, redlining, but not about how white people benefited. Oh, that's actually part of the Black Studies AP program that Florida objected to. They objected to this sentence: despite the growth of the black middle class, substantial disparities in wealth along racial lines remain. Discrimination and racial disparities in housing and employment stemming from the early 20th century limited black communities' accumulation of generational wealth in the second half of the 20th century because, as the mantra goes, you can do anything here in America. There's nothing keeping you from obtaining your dream. Bullshit. And that's what they don't want. Again, the truth is that no. You got to remember, we as a people, after chattel slavery, you know, there was a 2-year little floating period there, 1863, 1865, when everybody was finally made aware as far as the slaves concerned, you know, because Texas was a holdout there. They really didn't want, you know, the slaves to know that they were free, but let's just see, you know, 1865, so from that point on, all right, they just, you know, just go. So we, for the most part, had to fend for ourselves. And then they started up, I think it was 1871, the National Rifle Association. And the same year, the Ku Klux Klan was formed. And that was those old Confederate vets, I believe, started in Tennessee. And then, you know, you had the Freedmen's Bureau and all these promises that were made to us and that were, of course, broken. I'm talking about the Southern Kingdom now, but you got to remember with Gad, you know, the reservations and all that was going on. They were still having their land taken, and a few years later, you had the Dawes Act that was passed, or the Dawes Roll, and the $5 Indian, all that, you know. See, he's been very, you know, like I said, a snake is a snake is a snake, right? He made it so that he was profit in the end off of everything, off of our misery as a whole, all right? But then you had what? You had the Reconstruction period. They pulled protection as far as the military, all right? So now the Klan came after us, all right? And then Jim Crow, all these amendments, 13, 14, 15, 13th, of course, the way it was worded, you know, hey, we can't do without free labor. I mean, all these things, and despite all that I just told you, we built towns and settlements for ourselves to try to get away. But what did they do? They found a means, or they found an excuse, rather, to destroy those things, because after all, you got to understand, it was never meant for us to prosper here. This is not, as we keep telling you, this is not our rest. All right. We can go to Micah 2 and 10, go to Hebrews 11th chapter, 14, 15, and 16, Hebrews 13th chapter, 14th verse there. All right. This is place of our punishment. So yeah, they engineered all this shit. Then they have the nerve to turn around and tell me, well, there's no handouts and all this. Well, see, now you're a liar and you're a hypocrite. All right. That's why I said, and others, integration was a ploy. It was to get our money, our resources, what little we had. And that's the same thing today. You can understand, these immigrants that they allow, that they screen, that take on the mantle of so-called white supremacy, they're put in our communities. They're set up in our communities. They take what little wealth that we do have, all right, and they take it out to the suburbs. What is that, the rule of 72? Your money is supposed to pass around amongst your own for so many times before it goes out. We're the only ones that shit is at 0. All right, and they make sure of that. Anyway, so let's see. It says, let me find out where I left off. Salakia. I'll just start over. Now, that is an objective fact, right? There is nothing to argue about it, but the state reviewer said it was against their state law because it, quote, failed to offer reasons outside of systemic racism. Why would you need anything outside of it? Was what really happened? You see the games they play here? And it says, failed to offer reasons outside of systemic racism and discrimination for the wealth disparity between Black Americans and other groups. Well, what are those other reasons? I guess you could argue that black people are just lazy. That's another thing they like to say. Or maybe you could argue that black people are just dumb. Or maybe you could argue that these systemic barriers don't exist because white people were never racist. In any case, the arguments on the quote other side are lies. Again, something to make them folks feel good. All right. It says, but instead of telling the students lies, they just don't want you to learn what white people did. They don't want you to learn about the systemic barrier part. They don't want you to learn about the discrimination part. My suggestion to you people that view this video, I got it at the beginning of the year. It's a little book. It's about 180 pages long or so, thereabouts. It's called How White Folks Got So Rich. And it gives you a rundown, all right, of all the bullshit that they did. I don't have it on. Yeah, anyway, it's inaccessible right now, but it's really sad. You know, it's really sad because these are the things that should be taught. Not that, but see, you gotta understand the Amalekites, the ones that are pretending to be us, they've had this system in place, this strategy. You know, everything's about Psalms 83, keeping these people unaware of who they really are. Now, the more that you would teach the truth, like this book that I just mentioned and others, it will let you know, hey, these people are our enemy. All right, and there was a lesson there to be learned before this so-called integration. Why do you think ultimately they gave in? Reluctantly, yeah, but they gave in because it accomplished far more. All right, you got to understand, during that time period, the 50s, the 60s, with all the water hoses turned on our people, the dogs, the people like Sheriff Bull Connor down there in, was it Montgomery or Birmingham? I can't remember which one, but in Alabama. All that shit that was televised, that went around the world. All right, even though the technology was nowhere near what it is today as far as accessibility, But still, word spreads. Word of mouth is a big thing, still. People saw these things, if not then, eventually. Alright, say, what the hell? So they had to turn that around, even though I have a video saved from that. I think it was 1964. And there is an Edomite reporter, and he stated that fact. So they learned from what happened. Alright, so what do you think they did? They had to turn that around. Now look at our people. They did an excellent job. Unbeknownst to our people, because our people were fooled into thinking that, hey, we can still make it here. There's some hope left. No, there never was. When a person shows you their ass, when they show you who and what they really are, at some point you have to realize that's who that person is. There is no changing. After all these centuries, what the fuck? But that's the thing with Jake. Alright. They still believe in this piece of shit place called America. This place is wicked. This was set up for our punishment. Alright. Amara in the Hebrew means better. And it has been. Alright. That's why a lot of our people at Zechariah 13:8 is there for a reason. They're never going to get it. These are these same spirits coming back. The same ones that gave Moses trouble. Alright. And those same spirits that came back when Yahweh walked the earth. It's these same spirits now. That's why those 2/3 got to go. Somebody got to play that part, right? So let's continue on. All right, let's see. In any case, the arguments on the quote other side are lies. But instead of telling the students lies, they just don't want you to learn what white people did. All right. So let's skip on down. I already read that. Let's see. They don't want you to learn about the structural barrier and structural racism part, because that's what white people did. That's not black history. That's what white people did. It says, have you ever heard people object to when you say enslaved people instead of slave? Why do they object to that? Like, why do they want to say slave instead of an enslaved person? Well, when you say a slave, that's a noun. That's just what a person is. But if you say an enslaved person, then that infers that somebody was doing the enslaving. And that's why they object to it. And that's why they object to a lot of stuff. But it's really not the black history part of it, right? The Florida curriculum, for instance, it has this part where it talks about slave owners. But the only slave owners they list were black slave owners. And he gonna tear that new one on this, because we've noticed they do that, right? He says, and it is true that black people own slaves, but 99.5% of slave owners were, guess what? Them folks. All right. As a matter of fact, if you look even deeper, the black people owned slaves. Technically, a lot of them weren't enslavers. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, a lot of states allowed enslaved people to purchase their freedom. And some of those people, even when they were emancipated, or what they call manumitted, that means the former owners, maybe on their deathbed or something, maybe they just say, you know what, you were such a good servant, blah, 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 I'm going to grant you your freedom, that sort of thing. It says they will work and by the freedom of their wife, their children, or their loved ones. Aha! But if you were a free black person and you bought your wife out of slavery, technically, that was just a slave trade, right? So she was still enslaved technically, and your children were still enslaved because you technically owned them. He says, but those people were counted as still being enslaved. So it's probably even higher than 99.5% of white people own slaves. Continuing on, he said, but let's say it's 99.5%. To teach both sides is to teach a lie, right? You can teach that a dog says meow and cows bark because somewhere on the globe there's probably a cow that can bark. There probably is a dog that sounds like a cat. So if you're teaching both sides, you got to say, well, not all dogs bark, but if you are educating someone, the sound that most people will hear coming from a dog's mouth is not a meow. So teaching both sides is miseducating people. And what these laws do is advocate for the miseducation of so-called white people. White people want their children to be miseducated. Well, why? Well, you think about this. Say you are a white kid going to school or riding across town, and you pass through the black section of town. It is easy to tell the child that, well, these people don't work hard, these people don't value education, these people are more violent, and that's why they live in a place like this. It's easier to tell them than it is to say, well, hey, your grandmother and your grandfather and all of your ancestors supported a system that corralled black people into these areas using a system called Jim Crow or segregation, and they stood for it. Even if they didn't actively support it, they didn't try to change it. Then you have to teach them about redlining. Then you have to teach them about all the other systemic problems. Your grandfather moved to the suburbs because he got a government handout. It was called the New Deal. It's easier to teach them that black people cause their own problems than to teach them that most of the people in the society they live in the country that they call the freest country in the world, supported a system that gave them a systemic advantage at the expense of black people's humanity, at the expense of their freedom, at the expense of being equal. Well, that flies into everything they know. How could they say the Pledge of Allegiance? How could they sing the national anthem if they know that about their country? It presents a moral and philosophical dilemma, and that's hard for a child to understand. So they erase the white history. They erase what white people did. But it's not that they're trying to obscure what black people accomplished. It's not that they try to obscure the black past. They tried to whitewash what white people did. They're trying to make sense of a system of brutality, of inequality, of racial terrorism that cannot be married with living in the greatest, freest country in the world. Got to get this scripture now, because you can read, I'm just going to go to the point here. You can read from the beginning, all right, because it's going to righteous shall live by faith. Verse 4, behold his soul, and that's who we're dealing with. Remember I read Psalms 43 and 1. It says, behold his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by faith. And my point also in bringing Psalms 43 out, here it is, you're continually marching up and down these streets looking like a fucking idiot, all right, and it's falling on deaf ears, because this man clearly is not going to change. All right, but let's go straight to the point. That's verse 16. And this is another thing. Like last sentence I just read. All right, they've been told all their lives, this is the greatest country in the world, America, the symbol of freedom. And the total hypocrisy of it all, the glaring hypocrisy of it all. You've had a people here that have been just treated like shit for hundreds of years. And you got the nerve to have that pass through your lips. This is Habakkuk 2 and 16. Thou art filled with shameful glory. Drink thou also. This is Lamentations chapter 4, verses 20 and 21. Because this is all coming back to you, you damn devils. You're going to drink that cup. And what is that cup? Basically everything that you've done to us. All right. Thou art filled with shameful glory. Drink thou also, and let thy foreskin be uncovered. The cup of the Most High Yahweh's right hand shall be turned unto thee, and shameful spewing shall be on thy glory. What is this country broadcast for since its inception? This is the land of the free, the home of the free. But that's what I say to our people. What makes you think I was ever talking about you, talking about us? Our people are just gluttons for punishment. But this is a great time, I always say, to be alive. And I bring up Sirach or Ecclesiasticus chapter 25, verse 7. All right, and I'll get that momentarily, but I want to finish this. All right. It says, and the only thing that we can do is fight against the lies. Of course, we also can subscribe to this podcast. We can tell our friends about it, blah, 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 blah. That's a little promotion for him. It says, a lie don't care who tell it, and neither do white people. All right, so, and that's another quote. I can't remember who said it, but it goes something like this. It says, and this is what these devils have been so good at, because they still want to live in that lie. All right, it says, a lie will make it all around the world while the truth is still putting on its boots. Yeah. And that's certainly true. So that's it. I just wanted to, I have to get some of the comments if I can remember where they are. Let's see. Here they are. Let's see. And you have someone that got into their feelings. You know, critical race theory is just that. It's just a theory cooked up by black Democrats. Blah, 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 blah. And they get into his ass on this, all right? And he says it's pathetic, all right? He said you got so-called black people that agree with him on that. Oh, man, this is black. Somebody else said blacks need to learn world history and stop blaming America. Oh, man. It all comes out, see. Avin Davis says whites need to man up, stop lies, and tell the truth, and stop blaming black people, and tell the world that they center and confirm they steal, lie, rape, and kill anyone so they can justify and hide the truth. And they should start telling the truth about killing. Oh, here's one of them. All right. Oh, man. Someone says Dems can rot in hell. I agree with that. Because we know better here. Oh, man, let's see. Someone got the nerve to talk about the Civil Rights Act. Civil War. Lots have been done for blacks. Let's see. The truth, they're scared to tell the truth. Oh. Yeah. And someone fell right into that, what he told you about when he explained about what so-called blacks did. They were, of course, buy their own relatives out of it, so out of slavery, when they had the opportunity. Yeah, these people are just gone. Gone. Yeah. Yeah, these people. But that's going to be it. I mean, that was my point. But like I say, I'm going to end it with this scripture here. Because like I said, all this is coming to a head now. All right. This is Sirach or Ecclesiastes chapter 25, verse 7. It says, there be 9 things which I have judged in mine heart to be happy, and the 10th I will utter with my tongue. A man that hath joy of his children, and he that liveth to see the fall of his enemy. And we're seeing it now. This place America is through. You're seeing these European nations, and you think of the 10 toes of, Book of Daniel, and you think of that statue, the head of gold. All right, this relationship between these European nations, including America and Australia, wherever else these devils, all right, are in power. They're at each other's throat, and it's a beautiful thing to see. They've gone about over the centuries using that strategy against the indigenous peoples wherever they might go, plotting them against each other. Now it's happening to them. All right, hey, turnabout is fair play, as it says. So we're in this time. All right, we can't enjoy our children. Look where they're coming up in, especially now. Now they got drag queens teaching your kids. They're trying to push this. Anything to weaken their enemies. All right, the shit like that weakens you, and they know this. All right, and they're revealing who they really are when they, push this. But it's a good thing to see these countries that are resisting. So with that, again, hopefully whoever views this is edified, of course. That's what we do here, as I like to say, at Great Millstone. All right, filter everything through the scriptures. All right. So with that, until the next video, shalom.